What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller from hook'emheadlines.com. Coming back at you today with reaction and post-game analysis after Texas gets a much-needed bounce-back 56-46 win on the road in Stillwater over Oklahoma State. Texas looks much better on the defensive end of the floor after they gave up a record-breaking 116 points against Kansas State at home on January 3rd. You could tell that the defense was just a lot more resolute. Off-ball awareness, off-ball communication was a lot more timely, a lot crisper. The on-ball defense was a lot steadier. Texas wasn't getting blown by as much. They weren't caught sleeping as much in transition, closing out better on the three ball. And just in general, I thought the switching was a lot better, and that goes back to the communication aspect of it. And offensively, they were making plays when they needed to. Texas ends up going on a really big, I believe it was 12-1 run to close out this game. This sort of performance to close out a game is what I really like to see on the road, and what this Texas team really needs in terms of like showing out, building confidence, and getting some gritty performances late that will really be important come March and April. I really was impressed by what Texas did late in terms of like the off-ball movement on offense, some of the screen plays, and just generically how clutch a trio of players were that I'll dig into here. First, I wanted to mention Brock Cunningham. I included him in my two studs, one dud list for this game. I'll link that in the description below. He hits a critical late three to push Texas to nearly a double-digit lead. He was perfect on 2 attempts from the free throw line and ended up hitting 2 of 3 from beyond the arc. Also had 4 rebounds, 3 of which were on the offensive glass in just 14 minutes off the bench. I thought he was tremendous. He finishes with the second best game score for Texas. Timmy Allen, while, he wasn't hitting like late threes or anything like that, he was good on offense, steady on defense. This was one of the better defensive performances I thought that we've seen out of Allen this season. He ends up with 3 steals, ties a game high for Texas. And then he ends up with, I believe, 6 rebounds, 11 points, one of 2 Texas players to score in double figures. Only 2 assists, 3 turnovers. I thought that Texas had some missed opportunities when he had some nice dishes, and it kind of got him out of sorts as the game moved along. But all in all, really solid performance from Allen, all things considered. The last one I wanted to mention here is Marcus Carr. While it wasn't the same offensive outburst that we've seen him have in most games the last few weeks, he continues his streak scoring in the double figures, finishes up with a team-high 12 points, hit 1 critical 2-pointer late, and he was pretty good, like, facilitating the offense in terms of, like, kind of being the primary initiator and primary facilitator. I thought that Carr was really smart with how he saw the court with some of the decisions he was making, and that led him to put, I believe it was, a team-high 4 assists, which might not sound like much, but when you're playing a team that is I've been using the word gritty a lot, but it really is true, a team that is gritty and as solid on the defensive end of the floor as Oklahoma State is, especially when they're playing at home. Getting those 4 assists for Carr is huge. He will continue, I believe at this point, continue to lead the team in assists with a little more than 4 per game. He does have 3 turnovers, finishes the game shooting 4 of 11 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3, but this is the type of performance we need to see from Marcus Carr on the road. I mean, if he wants to continue averaging like 24 points per game as he did in the previous 6 outings, that's great too, but I still commend Marcus Carr for his performance in this one. He was my kind of one on the outside looking in terms of the studs and duds from this one. On the negative end of things in terms of individual performances for Texas, Tyrese Hunter has continued to struggle offensively. I was hoping after his 29-point outburst against Kansas State earlier this week that would really right the ship for him offensively. He was starting to hit more looks from 3. He was a little bit more active, finding some open lanes, open shots off ball, and even creating some of his own looks. But he ends up going 1 of 8 from the field, finishing with just 5 points. I believe it was 0 of 3 from beyond the arc. He had some open looks here. He just didn't look super confident pulling the trigger. And Really, like he ended up, I think it was somewhere in the ballpark of like 6 boards, but outside of a few nice defensive plays, I only saw one positive from him on the offensive end. So hopefully he comes back strong and looks more like he did against Kansas State or like he did in the first few games of the season when Texas hosts a tough opponent in TCU at the Moody Center next week. So a few other things I wanted to mention just in terms of individual performances in this game, some takeaways I had. Dylan Mitchell is an interesting case. He ends up with a team-high dozen boards. He was all over the place, especially on the offensive glass. He winds up playing 30 minutes in this game, which I don't know if that was a team high, but I think it was. Dozen offensive boards, 3 steals. His on-ball defense was really, really good, and obviously he's got an insane amount of vertical ability. He can leap right out of the building. He's a monster on the glass, but he continued to struggle to find his shot or find any way to contribute offensively besides getting some of those extra possessions back on the offensive glass. And so, getting some putbacks, things like that. He went 2 of 6 from the field. I've been mentioning it before, but this is the type of game where I'd like to see Mitchell take some of those open mid-range 2s that he had a chance to hit. Like, he's got a decent enough shooting stroke. I think he just needs to find the confidence to actually start getting those off. When Texas is stalling a little bit offensively or just facing a solid defensive team as Oklahoma State is, and you kind of need a spark or, you're finding some issues getting open shots, when you've got a guy like Mitchell that has a good enough stroke to hit those, I would like to see him actually be confident enough to pull the trigger there. Another note that I had coming out of this game was some of the play from some of the 2-man game, some of the screen and roll plays that we saw from the front court. I saw some nice handoffs between guys like Marcus Carr and Christian Bishop or Timmy Allen and Bishop that, while Texas might not have finished all of them, is the type of offensive 2-man game that I would like to see moving forward. I've mentioned a lot in recent weeks about Texas just looking more resolute on the offensive end of the floor. I think that under Rodney Terry, we've really seen the offense open up. The stalling possessions or just the scoring droughts that we saw a lot last season where Texas would go, 4 or 5 minutes at a time without making a single field goal. You're not seeing those types of droughts as much under Terry in the last 6 or 7 games. So that is a positive. I still would like to see Texas finishing better around the rim. Disu, Bishop weren't fantastic finishing around the rim, and that's something that's going to need to pick up when Texas plays some of the better teams in the front court in the Big 12. TCU is a good example of that. Did get a little bit lucky that Oklahoma State didn't have Musa Cisse in this game. He was out due to an ankle injury, and while I think Oklahoma State finished that game with double-digit blocks, which was just insane. They have a lot of good athletes that are feisty on defense, but Texas still was able to get some points in the paint thanks to the Big 12's block leader not being present. That's pretty much all that I have in terms of the positives and the negatives from this game in particular. Looking ahead, Texas has TCU on January 11th at home. Take a look here to see what lies ahead for the week after. Yeah, it's Texas Tech, a week from today, Texas Tech at home, and then they hit the road for 2 games against Iowa State and West Virginia. So you've got a stretch of winnable games coming up on the schedule. I mentioned it before. This was a much-needed win to right the ship after what happened against Kansas State. And I think this is the type of game that can kind of serve as a launch point for Texas to be one of the contenders in the Big 12 and continue to show that they're a top 10 team, even under Rodney Terry. I say even, I don't mean that to have a negative connotation because I think there's a lot of positive things that Texas has done in the 7 games under him, which is clear because they now have a 6-1 record, including 2 road wins and 3 tries in Big 12 play. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are solid teams. The Big 12 is a gauntlet, and Texas has passed 2 tough tests on the road already, showing good defensive grit in both games. Now, Texas just needs to, show that they can have that type of defensive output against a good TCU team when they return home on January 11th. But anyway, that is pretty much it for me from Andrew Miller and Hogan Headlines. Nice to have a good win this weekend to talk about for the Longhorns. Hope